Welcome to SynthGen update number 7, part 4, 5th attempt at recording it. Update number 7 is all about trying to get the Pi Pico W to talk Bluetooth to a bunch of Wii balance boards to read their sensors, and then it's going to send the data over OSC to some other machine, and we're going to do something with it. Unspecified, doesn't matter. I just need to get the data out of the Wii balance boards, which seems to be the kind of fiddly bit. Parts 1, 2, and 3, I was doing this using Platform IO. I mean, I wasn't doing it. I was just trying to get it set up. As far as I can tell, there's no really straightforward way to use the BT stack library. That's the part of the Pi Pico SDK that can do Bluetooth communication from Platform IO. So I'm trying to switch over to the SDK, which also is a Visual Studio Code extension, so not really too big a shift for me, but I've already done some of the work, so I'm going to go over what I've done here. All right, the steps to do this. First, I created a new profile in Visual Studio Code. This is something I hadn't used before, but if you install a bunch of extensions in Visual Studio Code, it's going to put each one is going to add a whole bunch of buttons, and soon you're just going to be completely overwhelmed with buttons and new panes and these different things on the side and different things on the top, and you're not going to know what they do. It's a big mess. And so to avoid that, you can make different profiles, and it seems like to some extent, not completely, I don't understand how this works, not completely, but it's to some extent, each profile is sort of a isolated instance of Visual Studio Code as far as extensions are concerned. Like in this case, you can see that there's the Platform IO, the little alien, it's gone. I still have it installed in the default profile, but it's not here. Instead, in this one, I have installed the, what do we call it? The Raspberry Pi Pico extension is what I showed up when I searched for Pico SDK. I think that's the right one. And so you get this little thing that looks a little bit like the alien head, but instead I think it's a Raspberry. And there's this little icon that looks like a Raspberry Pi Pico, so that's nice. They actually made it look like the thing, so you have some clue about what this little icon that showed up on your screen is about. In the Platform IO, there were some buttons up at the top to compile and run the project. In the Pico SDK, they're at the bottom. So, Visual Studio Code extension ecosystem seems like just as much a mess as any other. I can't agree on where to put the buttons. You end up with this mismatch of different things from different sources that do different things. Anyway, I installed the extension and the new profile, created a new project. I forget exactly how I did that. There was some button somewhere to create a new project. I picked a name for it. I called it Pico SDK 1. The old one was called Pico PIO 1, PIO for Platform IO. That's not a reference to the programmable IO on the Pico. When it first created the project, there was a C file, Pico SDK 1.c. People say you should call it main.c or CPP, whatever, I'll get to that. But by default, it called it the name of the project.c. So in order to switch to C++, I renamed the file, changed stdio, printfs, I used cout. And then I had to update CMake lists. What did I have to update? I had to update something in here, I think. Yeah, there was this line, add executable Pico SDK 1, reference the .cpp file instead of the .c file. Another thing I've had to do in order to get the serial port working was Pico enable stdio USB, and then the name of the program module, which is still Pico SDK 1, and then 1 to enable it. Otherwise, you could do it over the UART, or you could not have the serial at all if you don't need it. But I like it, at least for getting started, to as a way to, see what's going on, do some printfs essentially, although now I'm using count. Let's see. And once again, if you want to be able to get back into bootloader mode without having to unplug the thing, plug it back in holding the boot cell button, you can do it programmatically. So what I've done here is I just have the program run, count down 20 seconds, and when it gets to 0, reboot the thing. My goal will be to soon get back to the point where I type in a command to do that. But just for starters, to make sure it all works, I've done it this way. Let's see. So we can open I'm using PuTTY as before. I'm using PuTTY to communicate with the board. Right now it is back in bootloader mode. Is it back in bootloader mode? Yes, it is, because we can see the it's still mounted on this volumes RPi RP2. Wonder what. It's not a Pico 2, it's a Pico W, the first generation. I heard the new ones have all sorts of problems. But anyway, this is what it's called for whatever reason. That's what I told disk management to call it. And interestingly, when I did this with platform.io, I had to set an environment variable, platform.io _upload _port. That's if I didn't want to hard code it in my platform.io.ini, which I did not because it's a machine-specific setting. I had to set that to that path. Whereas in the Pico SDK, it somehow just finds it automatically. Now, if I had 2 of them and I only wanted to program 1, I'd probably still need to figure out how to configure it somehow. Maybe I can still do it with an environment variable. I don't know. I haven't had to figure that out yet. But we could change the program a little bit. Maybe delete this hello world part. And click run. And now that the thing is already back in bootloader mode, it should just work. And this, the SDK compiling toolchain business, the whole thing, seems like it might be a bit quicker than the platform.io one, so that's kind of nice. And now it's on COM8 again. We can see we got rid of the hello world. It's counting down. 2, 1. Error reading from serial device because it has just rebooted. Once again, back into bootloader mode so we can see the file system to which we would write new firmware. So that's all well and good. I'm going to conclude this section of the video because that was the best take yet.